All right. When I was in high school and even into college, I had a number of odd jobs, probably not unlike many of you. And I'm grateful for all those experiences. I think I learned a lot of things along the way, and not just about the specific work that I was doing, which was often manual labor, but they taught me things like responsibility and patience and endurance, those kind of lessons, the kind of lessons you don't even realize you're learning at the time. Okay. There was one job in particular where I worked for a home builder, and his name was Tommy. He hired myself and a couple of my friends to lay sod for him. He was paying a very fair wage at the time, and it seemed like fairly easy work. So we said, yeah, sign us up. So we showed up, and these were houses. This was a neighborhood in Atlanta, Georgia, or just outside of Atlanta, Georgia, and they were fairly large houses, large lots. So the first house had an enormous front yard, and there waiting for us when we arrived were these just big pallets of sod. We showed up, and Tommy was waiting for us. He said, "Okay, guys, here's how you do this." Now, there's more to laying sod than meets the eye, so we found out. This guy had a very high standard, so this wasn't just about throwing squares of grass onto the dirt until it was all covered. What he was looking for was a pristine outcome. He wanted a pristine outcome. So he wanted a level yard, no bumps or dips, just one smooth landscape is what he was looking for. And so Tommy showed us how to do that. He brought us out some rakes, and he showed us how to smooth the landscape. And he said, remove all the rocks from the soil that you rake up so that the sod lays completely flat. And here's how you level off the dirt. You move some dirt over here to fill it in over here, and you bring some dirt from over there. If you have a tall spot, take it out of here and take it over there. And I want a level front yard, he told us. Okay, do you understand? Yes, sir. Okay, get busy. So Tommy left us there laying down sod while he left to go tend to other matters. And like I said, this was in Atlanta. I don't remember exactly what time of year it was, but I do remember it was hot, and it was a large front yard. And I don't remember there being much shade either in the front yard either. So we were there in the hot sun for the better part of the day laying down sod. When we started, we did exactly as he told us. But as the day dragged on, we started to get a little sloppy with our work. And we thought, you know what? If we cover these little rocks, these smaller rocks, no one's going to see them. You don't know that there are rocks under sod if you're covering up those rocks. Sure, let's remove the big ones, but the small ones, no big deal. And you know what? That's not a terribly deep pit in the soil. It's flat enough. Let's just cover it up with sod. It'll all kind of, it's going to be fine. Who'll know anyway? Tommy will know, right? Right as we were nearing the end of our day, when we were laying down the last pieces of sod, Tommy pulls up to check out our work. He gets out and he looks at what we've done, and he starts pointing out a few things that he doesn't like. What's this? This isn't level. And then he would even pull up some of the squares of sod. Look, there are rocks under here. And we said, okay, Tommy, we'll fix those. We'll fix those. And do you know what he said? He said, nope. Pull them all up and start over. Pull them all up and start over. Every bit of them. We nearly started crying. A bunch of college-aged kids, exhausted, ready to be done and go have some fun with some of the money that we just made, right? And he's telling us to pull it all up and start over. And guess what? We laid the sod down, but this time, what did Tommy do? He stayed with us and made sure we did it right this time until the very last piece of sod was put down. Now, again, what did I learn that day? Yes, I learned how to lay sod, but there were other lessons learned that day that had nothing to do with sod. And here's the thing. I remember looking at that yard when we were done in the dark and thinking, yeah, that looks a lot better. That looks a lot better than our first try. And here's the short of it, okay? Whether he willfully decided this or not, Tommy was discipling us. Tommy was discipling. We often think of that as a strictly a Christian word, but he was discipling us. He was teaching us something. Okay, he wasn't interested in just seeing that we make a few bucks. Rather, he wanted us to understand that his standard should be our standard, that his ways should be our ways. This is what discipling is. No shortcuts. It's not just about finishing the job, but doing a job well. That's what he wanted us to see. That's what he wanted us to do. And sometimes it's not just about the job. Sometimes it's more about the process. There's something to be learned in the process. This is not unlike the way that Jesus taught his disciples too. We're going to see this in an account from the Gospel of Mark. And there's something that I should point out about the Gospel of Mark. The Gospel of Mark has a theme of discipleship running all the way through it, okay? When you consider the book of Mark and the things that Jesus did and said, his main audience was either his followers or his opponents, okay? But the theme is still discipleship, which means that Jesus, he wasn't looking just for a certain code of conduct, but he was looking for fellowship, following his teaching, and even facing the kind of rejection that he would face. In other words, Jesus isn't into shortcuts. He's not just trying to spoon feed us the right answers. That's something I think that we have to realize that very early on in our faith, that what faith is about, what the Christian faith is about, is not just saying right answers. And so often I think that, looking back on some of the churches and programs and evangelism programs that we did, it was more about, it felt like reciting the right answers. Make sure you understand this right answer. If you were to die and go to heaven tonight, right? What would your answer be? Okay, so what we see in the Gospel of Mark, what we see all through the Bible, it's not just about having the right answer. That doesn't do anything, just having the right answer. There's something to be learned in the process, okay? Jesus is interested in making us his disciples like him, all right? He's interested in making us like him. That's what he wants. That's his objective for us. And so we're going to look at two accounts in Mark. They are two separate events, but there is one central lesson or theme that we'll see unfolding. So we're going to look at the account of Jairus's daughter, but in the middle of that account, it's like an interruption, and we see that, oh, it's almost like a side story, but no, we'll see how it all fits together. Let's check it out. You can find the passage in Mark chapter 5, beginning in verse 21. And we're going to read the whole account. It's a rather long account, longer than what we would typically read up here. But again, we got to see the whole context. I want you to see the whole thing. It's one story with a story in between. And if we just try and pick out the one, we're going to miss the entire context. You got to read all of it. So we're going to read the whole thing. So bear with me as we get through it here. You can either follow along in your Bibles or follow along with me right here on the screen. But I want you to see the whole context. Mark 5, 21 to 43. Mark 5, 21 to 43, and it goes like this. And when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter's at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be well, so that she may be made well and live." And he went with him. And a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, "If I touch even his garments, I will be made well." And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she had been healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And then he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house some who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." And he allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. They came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Jesus saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. And when he had entered, he said to them, "Why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. But he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him, and went in where the child was. And taking her by the hand, he said to her, "Talitha cumi," which means, little girl, I say to you, arise. And immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age. And they were immediately overcome with amazement. And he strictly charged them that no one should know of this, and told them to give her something to eat. Okay, there it was. Again, like I said, a little bit longer than normal. But the first thing that we want to notice about this account is something that's a little disturbing, maybe the first time you come across it. It's easy for us to look at this account and be unfazed by it, because after all, a lot of us have heard these accounts before, many times before, and the bottom line is, we know the story has a great ending, both immediately and ultimately. We know it's got a good ending. But if you were in this situation originally, okay, if you were one of Jesus's disciples or the people in the crowd, or Jairus, right, you would have been greatly disturbed by the events and how they were transpiring. Jairus, okay, he would have been the president of the synagogue. So he would have been like a man of great devotion to God, great morality, respectability, probably wealthy, and was a prominent member of the community. But he's desperate. He's desperate because his little girl is at the point of death. All right. It says he not just that she might die, but she's at the point of death. She's going to die. She's going to die unless Jesus does something about it. Okay. So Jesus says, yeah, let's go. And you can imagine the tense nature of what's going on here. Jairus now probably feels like there's some hope to the situation, but you got to hurry, right? Now, to this point, people have probably heard of the miracles that Jesus had performed, rumor at this point, because again, even like we saw at the end of this passage, Jesus was still telling people strictly, don't tell anyone. Jesus was interested in not having people follow him because he was a magician, right? Or a healer of some kind, but he wanted disciples. He wanted real disciples. So that's why he was not letting the word get out, so to speak. And besides, it wasn't his time yet. Mark, and you have to understand that Mark isn't a gospel that wasn't necessarily written chronologically. It's very fast paced and bounces around quite a bit. And it's been described as a docudrama, highlighting poignant moments along the way. So not necessarily from Mark's point of view, but in the real timeline of Jesus's life, by this point, many people would have heard these stories of Jesus doing all these wondrous signs. But raising someone from the dead probably wasn't in anyone's mind at all. Because again, maybe some of even when you think about in Exodus and the magicians that Pharaoh employed, it was probably a lot of sleight of hand kind of stuff. I'm still amazed by the magic, quote unquote, or the sleight of hand that people can do. I'm fascinated by it. I've even joked that I would leave it all tomorrow to become a magician, in the sleight of hand sense. But again, that's not what these people were expecting here in terms of they were expecting that, not a raised body, okay, or someone raised from the dead. So that's why at this point he's still telling people, don't tell anybody. So they're moving along, and the crowd is following them because probably more than anything, people wanted to see what he was going to do. And if the rumors are true that he can do these wondrous signs, they're wanting to see it. They're wanting to be witness to the things that people are talking about. They want to see firsthand who this guy is and what in the world he's capable of doing. So as you can imagine, it's a hectic scene. Okay, it's a hectic scene. It's chaotic. It's hairy. They're moving through the area rapidly. They're in a rush. People are pressing in on Jesus from all sides. When all of a sudden, the rush stops, right? And Jesus says, "Who touched my garments?" Again, notice what he says. Not who touched me. No, that someone touched his garment. Someone touched my clothes, he says. So again, if you're one of the disciples or people following along and Jesus suddenly puts a stop to this hectic scene and says, "Who touched my clothes?" what are you going to say to him? First of all, you're going to say something probably a lot like the disciples said. Jesus, a lot of people are touching your clothes. A lot of people are pressing in on you. Second, you're going to tell him also, Jesus, we're in a hurry, remember? There's a little girl whose life is on the line, and you're worried about someone touching your clothes, right? There are more pressing things at hand here. Let's just lay the sod down, right? Let's just lay the sod down over the rocks, Jesus. Now, we're told that she came in fear. This woman came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. That means that she probably went into all the gory details. that we just received prior. She began to explain to Jesus that she had a chronic problem, a problem that she's lived with for 12 years, it says. And as the details are coming out, put yourself in Jairus's shoes. Just stop right there and put yourself in Jairus's shoes for a minute. Your daughter is dying. You're the only hope that you have is this rabbi who you've heard can do some wondrous signs. She's at the point of death. And now this woman that we've come upon is suddenly detailing all her problems that she's had for the last 12 years. So what are you thinking here? You're probably thinking, Jesus, come on. Why is he thinking that? Why is he thinking that? Number of reasons. First of all, again, like we said, this is a woman with a problem that in the day, it would have been considered a taboo to be out and about with this problem. And not just taboo, but even in some respects considered sinful. Anyone with a problem like this would have been considered ceremonially unclean, okay? So that means at the very least, you couldn't go into public worship. And because of that, because you were unclean, that means you couldn't touch anybody because you would make them unclean. So you had to distance yourself from other people so they wouldn't become unclean. This all feels a little too familiar. I know that. I don't know if you've had any scares with coming into contact with someone that has been tested positive for COVID yet, but it's very much the same thing. Once you realize that, oh, I've been near that person hasn't, now what do? I feel like I need to walk up and down the hallways yelling unclean, right? It was very similar back then. If you were unclean, you had to let everyone know around you were unclean so they wouldn't be unclean, okay? So again, this is an unclean person. This is a sinner. Now, and I don't want you to miss this, but look what's happening here. This is so profound. The unclean coming into contact with the clean. The very righteous of the very righteousness of Christ. Okay, notice what happens in verse 30. It says this, right? I just want to pull up one section here of what we've already read, the lengthy passage. In verse 30, it says, "And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him." Isn't that peculiar? Did you catch that? Power had gone out from him. You might say that he had weakened a little bit, right? Very peculiar. How many actions have we talked about in this study where we see that Jesus has power over everything? Jesus in the boat in the midst of the storm, he talks to the storm as if he were talking to a misbehaving toddler. Peace, be still, right? And the storm quiets. The disciples said, who is this, right? Who is this? Who has this kind of authority, such authority that he can still the storm? Authority means literally from the author, the one who built these things, the one who built the body, the one who built the storms, the one who built nature. He has power over these things. And remember a couple of weeks ago when we looked at the account of Jesus sending the demons into the herd of pigs, as you read that account, you certainly get the sense that he did this without breaking a sweat. They pleaded with him not to take the one course of action, and instead he sent them into the pigs. He saw them and he sent them just into the pigs. Very willful and done for a reason, as we discussed a couple weeks ago. So I guess the question here is, if you can handle a legion of demons, if you can handle a hurricane at sea, why in the world would it tax his strength to heal this woman? She touches him. He loses power. He feels a drain, so to speak. Why? Why that little detail in here? I think it's because Mark is trying to tell us something. He's giving us a little bit of commentary here. Again, this is kind of Mark looking back at all these things, and in retrospect, this is what we're doing in the study. We're not just looking at what Jesus said and what he did, but what did he mean by the things he did and said? And here, what's going on? The clean, or the unclean, right, is meeting the clean. And for her, listen to this, for her to get strong, he had to what? He had to get weak. You see that? What's he telling us here? This is a foreshadowing of the cross. This is the principal lesson of the cross. This is the bigger picture that Jesus is interested in teaching. He's not just going to give us the right answer to the problem, right? He has a bigger picture to paint here. He's telling us the gospel here. For you and me, the unclean would become clean by way of the weakening of Christ. The cross, right? And the result, we are made strong because of the cross, because of him volunteering himself and making himself weak. We are made strong. What a great picture of the cross this is. What a great picture of Jesus' suffering we're seeing foreshadowed in this account, telescoped out, that for us to become strong, He would have to become weak. And it's right there. He's telling us the gospel, right? Even before we fully understand and see how it happens. Now, if only this story had a resurrection piece to it. Though these incidents seem separated, the woman and Jairus' daughter, they're so closely related. They're part of the same story. This is the resurrection part. We just heard about the crucifixion, the suffering part, and now we're going to get the rest of the story through the resurrection. They're pointing to what will ultimately be complete in Christ here. That's what's happening here. That's where the story's headed. This isn't an accident. The weak become strong, the strong becomes weak, and as a result, we have renewal of life. We have a resurrection. We have death undone, as it were. Okay, so here's this woman. She touches Jesus's robe, and she's healed, and Jesus says, "Who touched me?" Then she begins detailing her problem, and this is coming out. And if you're the disciples or Jairus, again, you're wanting to interrupt, saying, let's get the heck away from her, right? She's unclean. In fact, let's run. We're in a hurry. We needn't be around someone like this much more. A rabbi shouldn't be around someone like this, Jesus. But even so, just picture, again, what's going on here and put yourself in the scenario. Set the uncleanness aside for a minute. If you're an ER doctor, some of you are medical professionals and very familiar with how an ER might work. But if you're an ER doctor and two patients are brought before you, one is a patient with a chronic problem that she's lived with for years and years and years, and the other is a little girl who's about to die. Okay, triage time. Who gets the attention? Of course, it's the most critical patient first, right? That's the nature of triage. Yet Jesus says, let's deal with this woman with a chronic problem. Do you know what that is in modern day time? That would be considered malpractice. That's malpractice, right? And it's only underscored by the result. He deals with this woman. He takes the time to and even hear her story, and who knows how long that might have taken for her to tell the story. He heals her, and she walks away. She walks away healed. And then someone comes along with the bad news that Jairus' daughter has died. You know, Jesus, while you were talking with a woman here, while you were hearing out her story, while you paused, and we were on our way, and you decided, let's listen to her. See, well, now there's no need to hurry. We stuck around here too long, and I guess, you know, Jesus made his decision to focus on the woman and her problem that she had lived with for 12 years, right? And allowed this little girl to perish in the process. Nevertheless, what happens? Jesus looks at Jairus and essentially tells him, no, trust me. Can you just trust me here? Jesus is telling us here, and you know, how many times has this happened to you, right? How many times are you looking for an immediate result right here and right now? But Jesus, his answer is, I will not be hurried. It doesn't matter what it looks like. I will not be hurried. God's blessing and God's grace almost never seems to operate according to our schedule. Have you noticed that? Do you ever feel like you're dying on the vine, you're praying for something, and you feel this such a sense of panic, a sense of immediacy, right? Just your problem needs to be resolved in the moment. Lord, this is something that needs your attention right now. I can't take it any longer. Lord, you absolutely can't allow this to happen. God, why would you let this happen? You see the bigger picture here? And what should we take from that? In these moments here, we have to realize that God, listen to this, that God is not telling us, even though this is how we often interpret it, we often think we hear God telling us, I will not be hurried, but I love you anyway, right? That's what we think we hear. I will not be hurried, but I love you anyway. That's not what he's saying. Look how this passage unfolds. God tells us, I will not be hurried because I love you. I will not be hurried because I love you. I know what I'm doing. If you insist on imposing your understanding of what right timing is, if you try and impose that on me, you're never going to feel loved by me. You'll constantly feel like God is never answering your prayer. See, because it's you setting up the timetable. And when things don't happen according to your timetable, you walk away thinking, another prayer unanswered, right? This is what Jairus is thinking. Oh, well, another prayer unanswered, I guess. Don't bother the teacher anymore. He's made up his mind and he's made his decision. When the reality is what? Just like with Jairus, the story isn't finished. It's not the destination. It's the journey, right? It's the process. It's discipleship. Look at Jairus. Think about him. Think about, what did Jairus come to Jesus for? He came to Jesus hoping to have him cure a sickness, right? His daughter was ill. He wanted him to cure the illness. That's what he wanted. He wanted an answer. A resurrection was probably the furthest thing from his mind. He went to Jesus looking for him to cure a sickness, and what did he get instead? He got a resurrection. Jesus, heal her before she dies. That was the best possible outcome, most wild outcome that Jairus would have imagined, that Jesus would get there in time to heal his daughter. That was the ultimate answer for Jairus. Instead, look what he got. Look what he got instead. But there's another side to it too. Not only did Jairus not expect enough from Jesus, look what Jesus is asking from Jairus. Jesus is asking more from Jairus than he was prepared to give. He came thinking he was going to have to trust Jesus enough just to get home, hoping that somehow the child wouldn't die before he got home. But Jesus is demanding more. He allowed the daughter to die. The daughter was dead, and Jesus looked at Jairus and then said, "Do you still trust me? You see everything that's happened here, Jairus? Do you still trust me?" That was way beyond anything he first went to Jesus for. Same thing with a woman. It's not different with a woman. Look at her. What was her plan? Think about what do you think her plan was? She just went up and touched his garment. So her plan, if all went according to plan, if the best possible outcome would be for her to touch his clothes and run away. And if all worked according to plan, she wanted to touch his clothes, say, "I'm better, and I'm out of here." Was that good with Jesus? No. Jesus makes a spectacle of it. According to how it should have gone for her, as she's formulating this plan, her schedule, her timetable, the best possible outcome would be for me to touch him unnoticed and get out. But Jesus expects more. Why? Because he's doing more. Because she needs more. She needs more than just the right answer. She needs more than just great. That was awesome. I'm healed. There's something to be learned from the journey here. You see, look at her. She thinks she's going to touch his clothes and will be magically healed, just like we were talking a moment ago, just like everyone else was thinking Jesus was some kind of magician, right? She thinks if she can touch his clothing and she will somehow magically be healed, but Jesus doesn't let her walk away with that. Instead, he says, "Oh no, it's not magic that healed you. It's faith that healed you. It's belief in what I could do. You can't just throw sod on the dirt here, right? There's more to it here." And in the process of doing this, he turns her understanding of him from magician to savior. By going through the whole process, she has an understanding of him now that went from magician to savior. Jesus doesn't just say, "Hey, come to me and I'll meet all your needs." That's not what Jesus says. He says, "Come to me and I'll change you." By requiring far more than she expected to give, he made a disciple out of her. He made a follower out of her. Okay? So before we took this detour, we last left off with a messenger informing them that the little girl had passed. And see, Luke has a comment here that I want to share with you. Luke says, I once heard it said that the woman in the crowd thought she could get healing in secret, right? And that Jairus could use his earthly status to get service from Christ, right? Oh, good point. This is great. But what they both got was what they needed most of all. They saw Christ face to face and knew that he was the way, the truth, and the life. Right? Think about the social structure that would have taken place. Jairus with all the influence and money and power. Of course, he got the attention of the local rabbi, right? That could do these awesome things. But what about the woman? The woman who had no resource to her, the woman who had no influence. She got the same thing. She got the same thing, face-to-face encounter with Christ and changed as a result of it. Great point, Luke. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay, so we took a detour. We last left off with the messenger informing them that the little girl has died because Jesus took his time as he dealt with this woman with the issue that she'd lived with for 12 years. Now, could it have waited another hour or so for Jesus to treat this little girl, or could he have waited to treat the woman with the issue with blood before treating the girl? Why trouble the teacher any further? They're thinking, that could have waited. Why did he do this? But Jesus looks at Jairus and says, "Hey, just trust me." Little does Jairus know that the story isn't over yet. okay? In spite of the fact that the little girl has passed, Jesus heads over there with a small group. Again, he's trying not to make a spectacle here. They go in. Everybody is mourning and wailing. It would have been very, very loud. Okay, the mourning, and Jesus walks in and he says she's just sleeping. Now everyone laughs at him for that. Okay, don't be confused by that. Everybody understood. That's why they laughed at him. Jesus understood. She's dead. Okay, she's dead. She's not just seemingly dead. She's not on the brink of death. She's dead. Okay, then why does he make reference to sleep? Why does he say anything about sleep? Here's why. He goes in, he sits down, he takes her by the hand, and he says two things to her. The first word he says is Talitha. That's an Aramaic word that Mark would have been writing this letter in Greek, and here he inserts this Aramaic word. Now, why wouldn't he have just translated it word for word? Why does he stick this Aramaic word in it? Because if you straight up translate it, you get this as it says in the text, little girl. But that doesn't quite get across the sense of what he's actually saying to her. It's not just little girl. That's the literal translation. But it's actually a term of endearment. So it's kind of like a name that a mother would use to talk with her little girl, or a father with her little girl, like saying sweetie or honey. So Jesus is taking her by the hand and saying, sweetie, okay, sweetie. Now the second thing he says is kumi. And they translate it for us, and Mark translates it for us as, I say to you, arise. So again, that's the literal translation. But again, Mark put it in here, noting that it's a familiar Aramaic expression. That is the only word that I can think of to describe is like folksy or familiar, right? If you were, my kids have been, I've noticed my kids have been using an expression lately, and I was a little puzzled by it. The word that they were using, and I promise you this is going to be new for a lot of you, the word that they were using was the word yeet, Y-E-E-T. And I would hear them, particularly when they would throw something, like if they were throwing a football really hard, as they were throwing it, they'd yell yeet. Or if they were putting something in the trash can with any kind of force, like if they were going to pretend they were dunking it, they'd say yeet. And I was like, what in the world does that mean? And so I even looked it up, and it's a little bit of unknown, but it says, this is from a site, howtogeek.com. So yeet is a word that means to throw, and it can be used as an exclamation while throwing something. It's also used as a nonsense word, usually to add humor to an action or a verbal response. And it goes on to say its meaning and usage seems to stem from early 2000s hip hop. So again, it's a word that, because I'm older, I guess quite understand. As a matter of fact, when I even do try and use it, I'll try and say something like to my son, will you go yeet this into the trash can? And my son just looks at me and shakes his head and he goes, no, Dad, stop. Just please don't even try to use it, because it's not just a literal, I'm trying to literally translate the word yeet to throw, but no, there's something else to it. There's a familiarity there that I'm missing to it that I can't use, because I even embarrass my son. If he knew that I was talking about this word right now to my learning group class, he'd be mortified probably. So next time you see my son, try and use the word yeet in a sentence, my older son Jack, and then he's just going to shake his head like, oh, old person. That's what he's going to think. But anyway, if you just try and literally translate, it's a long way to get to where I was going here, but if you try and literally translate the word yeet to just throw something, you're missing something. You're missing the enthusiasm. You're missing the real nature to it. So again, it's not just that Jesus is just telling this girl, arise and be resurrected. Okay, if we were making a literal translation, it would say, little girl, arise and be resurrected. No, it's more like Jesus is saying, sweetie, come on now, get up. It's what you would say to your child if they were, waking up from a long nap. You'd say something, maybe a long nap. You'd say something like, come on, get up, sleepyhead, like that. And then she wakes up. Again, it's not that she's asleep. She's dead. And again, this is the power of Christ. He has power over the storm. He has power over the demons, and he effortlessly quiets them. And now he says to a more powerful force than a storm, or more powerful than a force of demons, he faces death. And such is his power that if he holds her by the hand and he gently lifts her up right through it effortlessly, sweetie, wake up, sleepyhead. It's as if he's saying, death is nothing more than a good nap if I've got you by the hand. If I've got you by the hand, This is nothing to me. It's like a nap. I have power over all of it. I have power over every single circumstance you could possibly face, including and especially death. And if I have power over death, if I can talk to it like it's nothing at all, if I can overcome it just like that, what do you have to fear? What do you have to fear? All right, so let's bring it all back around and let's tie it up in a bow here. Okay, we can't hurry Jesus. That's what we're seeing from this account. We can't hurry Jesus. He has in his mind for us a journey, not just simple answers. The Christian faith has never been about just learning the right answers. And again, I even try and be mindful of this as I raise my children. I want to fill them with the right answers, yes, but not just the right answers. They have to know the right answers, and they have to see the right answers lived out. That's what discipleship is. That's what Tommy was doing for us all those years ago when I was laying sod. You know what? He could have just fired us. He could have said, you know what? You did a terrible job. Go home. But instead, he stayed there with us, making sure that we understood what had to be done and why it had to be done that way. Okay? So again, same thing with Jesus. He's not into just giving you simple answers. He's not just out to give you a great outcome, right? This is why we don't want to hurry Jesus. He's doing something. He's doing something in the process that we often can't see what he's doing. Okay? We tend to view things in the moment, myopically. God, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why a pandemic, God? You know, why that now? When I look and see how few people might be out in the sanctuary, God, why would you do that? Why would you do that? This all seems backwards. There are important things on the line here. And if you don't tend to them, God, someone's going to die. Something's going to happen. Your church is going to die, you know? And thankfully, God doesn't react to my panic. God doesn't react to our panic, right? Instead, he tells you, be patient and trust me. Be patient and trust me. He's not saying I won't be hurried and I love you. He's saying I won't be hurried because I love you. I'm doing this because I love you. Okay? I'm doing something much bigger that you can't wrap your head around right now. I'm interested in the journey for you, not just the quick answers that will get you through the day. I'm not interested in solving your problems to make your life easier. The Christian faith has never been about that, just solving your problems to make your life easier. I'm interested in making you a disciple. This is what we read over and over again, all throughout, especially the Gospel of Mark, but also the scriptures of pages of Scripture as well too. I'm interested in making you a disciple, a follower, all right, and making you more like me. And I'm going to do whatever I need to do, he says, to accomplish that in you. Okay. Great question here. So that's kind of what I wanted to bring out in these two passages. Again, don't think of them as you approach them as two separate accounts, but one whole account that's working together. We see the suffering, we see the cross and the resurrection. It's the story of the gospel all in one. Jesus making disciples. So we have a question that has come through. Thank you for sending these questions, you guys. It makes it so much better when we have these questions. This one comes from Kim. Is there a connection between the woman's time of suffering 12 years and the girl's age 12 years? Oh, what a great question. I had not considered this at all. I always assumed that they put the age of the girl, she was 12 years in there, to show that, when he made commentary that she was getting up to walk about, that this wasn't like an infant or a toddler, but she was 12 and she knew how to walk by this point. But that's very interesting. I don't know if there is 12 years and 12. It could also mean that, again, when we're considering God's timing in all of this, what's the difference between 12 years and 12 days? 12 years and 12 years, the life of a little girl and 12 years of suffering. It's all on God's timetable, but that's very interesting. Great question. If anyone has any other suggestions, then I'm all ears. Anyone else? Any thoughts or comments or questions as we wrap it up? It's about 12 minutes till. If I don't see anything else come through in the next couple of ticks here. Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mildred. Well, great. Again, as you consider these lessons in Scripture, again, I hope what you're picking up here is that it's difficult to take one isolated account and then read that and try and get an understanding from it. You always have to look at the context around it and see how it fits in with the rest of Scripture. Even how you can get a full context of something that's going on in the New Testament and still miss something because you're not considering what had happened in the Old Testament. That's why I love looking at both. I try and alternate back and forth, Old Testament, New Testament, and we'll see where it goes. So, we do know where it goes from here. Anyway, remember, I've asked you all if you have any questions or topics that you want to see considered in the fall. Go ahead and send those to me, and that's what we'll be discussing next semester. We still got a few weeks on that. We'll still have a few weeks remaining in this study, but I would love to hear your questions on topics that you would like to hear comment on in a more full format, lesson style, okay? Thanks again for joining me. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. I think it's very meaningful, not only for me, but for you guys too. I appreciate you all joining me. And again, as always, hope to see you all soon, whether it's online or in person. But until then, please know I love you very much. And I look forward to when I can see you all again. Okay? Have a great week.